Hello everybody. As I promised the last time I spoke, I would come back to you and talk to you a little bit about this fifth dimension aspect that everybody's been going on about, that's associated with this timing of the 2012 going into the 2013. And there are many aspects to this fifth dimensional, but I just want to give you just a simple one, just for starters, so to speak. And in order to speak to you about this, I thought I'd share an experience that I started to have from the early part of December last year. Although I've seen spirit and had many happenings on those sort of aspects, I never quite thought about the difference of visions in the true sense of vision. And we'd gone away to spend a few days with a friend, and he'd got 2 cats and had gone to bed. My husband was asleep, and I thought one of his cats had just jumped onto the bed, and you know how they paw on the bed to make themselves comfy. And I sat up, and in front of me, on the whole expanse of the bedroom wall, it was like going back in time to the 50s or the 60s, or the old Path News and the cinemas. And what I saw was a lot of men back to the Industrial Revolution time even, and they'd got bare chests, and they'd got mining hats on, and some had got shirts on semi-open. All were just walking to the right, all across the length of the wall, and it was very different from any feeling or experience that I'd had before. And I just sort of came to terms with what I saw, and although I had a sleepless night, I did eventually have a couple of hours. The cat wasn't on the bed, by the way. A couple of days later, when we'd got home, a similar experience happened. This time it was as if I felt something on the bed, again as if it was like a cat. But when I sat up, the whole of the wall again had lit up like in a cinema. This time everything was moving off to the left, and what I saw were my maternal and paternal grandparents, from as though they were a child growing up into womanhood. I saw my mother when she was little, I saw myself and my sister when we were little, just like a movie of a whole life, but this was all going to the left. And I pondered on it. I still didn't know what to make of this. But coming more up to date, because these sort of visions have continued. One of the most recent ones was a vision where I saw like an old news reel of some sort, with things going, people going to the right, even to the war years with soldiers and World War II, and then going to the right, I was going to the left rather, I was seeing again members of the family, but what would have gone on back to Victorian times. But all of a sudden down the centre, it was as if these 2 aspects parted, and there was just a rush of energy going down the middle, and I hadn't got a clue what that was to do with. Spirit never worked very quickly with you. It's either cryptic or bit by bit, as I'm sure many of you who've experienced spirit will come to understand, if you haven't already, I mean. Anyway, I was sitting talking with my husband a couple of Sundays ago, and spirit had started to talk to me, or my mentors, and they were on about different aspects of the fifth dimension. And they began with talking about 2D, 2D when we're looking at photographs or pictures, and then the 3D as we come into to understand when we go to the cinema or whatever. And then 4th dimension, which is known as space-time or real-time. 4th dimension is that dimension by which we can measure time, because 1st, 2nd and 3rd dimension, it just is what it is. But the 4th dimension allows us to understand whether we're seeing something in history, whether it's some perhaps fable or fiction story or a documentary or whatever. But the 4th dimension is important because it's space-time. It gives us more understanding as time, about time as we know it. Right, now we're coming into the 5th dimensional aspect. This vision that parted almost like the Red Sea parting with these two sort of past and history and whatever that was going on. Once it had parted down the middle, and I saw all of this whooshing, or hearing it really, and like whooshing light, I suppose, but not light bright. They started to tell me that I was witnessing the 5th dimensional vortex. Now, every time man has understanding of each dimension, the new dimension is always at a right angle, which is known as, if I can remember how to pronounce it, orthogonal. I don't know whether I pronounced that right, but it's a right angle. Why Spirit want me to say that to you exactly, I'm not quite sure, but they've thrown that little bit in for your understanding. And the 5th dimension is that we can look forward, some would say like an imaginary scene, something you imagine that's up the road or at the end of the tunnel, so to speak. It's not been written in 3D or witnessed by 4D, etc., etc. But not only are we able to understand or imagine and then come to know what is further on up the road, which is much like different people have visions have had, like your Nostradamus and your prophecies, etc. They've been able to see along this space and time and dimension on a 5th dimensional level. Now, to make it viable rather than just imaginary fairy tale stuff, it's a rising frequency in a sense in order to accommodate yourself with the ability to be able to understand 5th dimensional. And in order to have a vision of what's in 20 years' time, for instance, then at the same time, much like your timeline on your Facebook and your social chat networks and that, we can understand the possibility or even have a vision of what is, say, in 20, 30 years' time, because of what happened 30 years ago or 100 years ago. But at the same time as witnessing all of this other dimensional stuff, it's as if we're accompanied with a knowing, some would call it intuition, a gut feeling or whatever. But it's because we have raised our status a little bit because of these times we've come into. The time of Aquarius, always to do with the mind, our head in the clouds, if you like, much like your computers are doing, whichever way you want to understand it as being. It's given us chance on a ground level to understand the fifth dimensional aspect from this aspect. There are several other layers, and it does go into all your quantum mechanics and your quantum physics and your fanciful words and that. But I felt it would be a starting point for everybody to understand that it's not something that is only there for people with scientific minds to understand, or with letters after the name or whatever. It's quite simple. You only have to be living in the here and the now, whilst this fifth dimension it's almost like an inception of it is coming into being. There is another facet of the human being. So whilst the ordinary person is getting used to watching films in 3D and understanding the fourth dimensional aspect because of history and possibly studying where man could be moving on to because of history, the cause and effect, if you like. It's as if whatever you can imagine, whatever your ideas are, is quite an exciting time once you understand and get this little bit down. And I do hope I've tried to at least given you some food for thought to mull over yourself, and I'm sure your mentors or whoever is there that inspires you, or your higher self, may add a little bit more to the understanding of this seed that I'm just trying to sow with you, that is there for us all to understand. And of course the youngsters will probably grasp it much more quickly than those who have been around a little bit longer. But these vision things that I saw and this opening, I could suddenly see myself at 5 years of age at the same time as that I could see myself at 75 years of age, all at the same time. So there is no such thing as time, and yet it is, because of the fourth dimension aspect that allows us to register these things. It is just food for thought. There's much more to it, and aspects of us as human beings coming into this Aquarian age does mean our frequency is raising. But just in me saying that to you, it just means that you're capable of taking on board that which I'm trying to sort of touch base with you. And probably many of you will add to whatever seeds I've sown, as I've said. And this is how we all learn from each other and how we all grow and evolve in an ideal world, in an ideal way. But if you want to ask me any questions or get in touch with me, as I've said before, you can get in touch with me at SpiritualJourneyman.com, and I will always email you any answers back or chat with you or whatever. We're all here to be helping each other at this time, although there are a lot that would like us not to be helping each other, if you get my meaning. But I will say many blessings to you. Thank you very much for being there and watching me and staying with me. I thank you all. Speak to you all soon.